Hey guys, it's time for another game review. I know my game reviews usually don't go over well, but that's the good part about not doing YouTube as a regular job, because it doesn't matter how many views I get, I don't get paid either way, so basically I can just put up whatever I want. Don't get me wrong though, I do enjoy getting views and I like putting content out that you guys like, but I don't, sometimes my hardware reviews, I don't have anything lined up, or I'm having some technical difficulties, and it has to do with the blog too, because I know I've got a lot of people that really like the blog, and they actually prefer the written stuff, so I like to do them at the same time. So in between, I want to do some game stuff. So what I'm going to be talking about today is a series of 3 games. They're like the Yugo Trilogy, and these are older 90s point-and-click adventure games. I've beaten all of these games. I wanted to put myself a little rule. I didn't want to use the internet. I wanted to see if I could beat them, me and actually what resources would probably be available in the 90s. So just, my knowledge, asking people around me, things like that. I just did not want to use the internet to look up solutions to the puzzles. Fortunately, though, these games, they're pretty easy. There was only a couple spots that really gave me trouble. But we'll start with the first game. The first game is Yugo's House of Horrors. Now, okay, as for these games, mostly you find them in shareware. There are physical releases, like mine came on a CD 6-pack that had all 3 games on it. Unfortunately, it's all shareware, and it wants you to register. You can't finish the game. But I've seen copies of this game on like 5.25-inch disc, 3.5, a sleeve. I assume most of those are shareware versions. I'm sure there's probably like complete versions out there. I did break my own little rule this time. Instead of actually playing on real hardware at the disc, I did go with the GOG Good Old Games release and ran it through VMSCUMM emulator in Windows 7. I don't like to do that, but in the case of these games, they're so small and they're so kind of nichey, and just the physical releases seem to be all like shareware. I went with it. There's also 2 versions. There were DOS versions. At least in the first game there was a DOS version, and later they were redone for Windows, Windows 95/98, and there are a couple differences. Most of the Windows versions introduced a mouse interface and some MIDI, like basic MIDI tunes, which the DOS version lacked. But anyways, we'll get to the first game, Yugo's House of Horrors. Now, the first thing you notice, this is very low budgety. I mean, graphically speaking, it almost looks like someone made it in MS Paint. But, that's a little bit of the charm. I think most of that can be attributed to as far as I know, these are kind of the work of one man, David Gray, who did all of these games. So, you gotta cut it some slack for that. But the first game, Yugo's House of Horrors, I've also heard it, under a couple different names, but that's the general name, Yugo's House of Horrors, and it takes place in a haunted house. And like I said, it's your standard fare point and click. Your girlfriend has been kidnapped, and she's in this haunted house, and you basically have to go around and solve pretty simple logic puzzles about getting into the house. Yeah, it kind of is a little bit reminiscent of Maniac Mansion. Of course, it doesn't come near the greatness of that game, but it's sort of reminiscent of it. So you have to go into this home, and it's full of like crazy inhabitants. The part, there's a mouse interface, but there's also text, like a lot of these old point and click adventure games. There's a lot of text input, open door, do this, do that. And generally, I didn't have too many problems with the interface. There were a couple things, like it took me a bit to figure out the correct phrase for opening the bolted trap door. There's a couple sections like that. You just have to play around with your words a little bit to find the correct phrase. But this game is really short. If you know what you're doing, you can beat it in under an hour. First time playing it, except for the part where I had to stop and find the answer to a riddle I'll talk about in a minute. It took me about 2 hours, a little under 2 hours to get through the whole game. The mansion itself, there's only a couple rooms, maybe 6 or 7 screens for the house. I think in the entire game, it's probably about 14 screens that comprise the entirety of the game. But so as for the haunted house itself, there really isn't too much to it. You just kind of go around. There's some cool, wacky moments. Like there's a mad scientist, and you can kind of engage in his his experiments. There was one cool room where you go in and there's like a butler and there's a table and there's a bunch of like monsters sitting around it just having dinner. There's like a Frankenstein who's, you know, kind of smartly dressed. You got Dracula, some kind of zombie girl. It looks like the Grim Reaper. Some big furry dude that reminds me of that furry goon thing from those old Looney Tune cartoons. And then there's one guy, I mean, I guess he's a zombie. You can only see him in his like blue outfit and green hair. I don't know. I kind of like to think he's the Joker. For some reason, the Joker's there having dinner with all these monsters. But yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot of ways to die in the game either. There are a couple ways you can get killed. You know, I think the butler can chop your head off. There's a mummy that will kill you. There's a dog that will kill you. But generally, it's a pretty forgiving game. Another good thing is there weren't really any like dead man walking scenarios where you can miss an item and can't go back and you're kind of screwed. So, I mean, that could be attributed to the game just being short. So there wasn't really a lot of opportunity for the game to screw you over like that. But yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to say. There's a couple spots where it's kind of hard to figure out where to go next. Like in the basement, there's this part where the way through, there's a path, but it's behind some rocks, so it's kind of obscured. That was a little bit annoying to kind of like find that. But I mean, other than that one thing I can think of, there's not a whole lot of issues with where to go next. I think the biggest thing that got me though is that at the end there's kind of like an old man, and you can't progress unless you answer his questions. And well, for the most part, his questions are pretty easy, especially if you're kind of a nerd, because some of them are kind of, I think there's like a Lord of the Rings question and stuff like that. But the one that got me, it was like, what was Roy Rogers' horse's name? Now, I am not a big fan of Westerns, so I had no clue. Now, remember, I had my no internet rule, so what was I going to do? I mean, go to the library, look up a Roy Rogers book. I guess I could have kind of done that. But thankfully, I asked around. Finally, I found someone that knew the answer to this question. So I was able to figure it out that way. But, I mean, other than that, I mean, the questions really aren't that hard. The puzzles aren't hard. They're pretty obvious. I mean, compared to some other point-and-click, like Sierra point-and-click adventure games and some games where, like, the logic puzzles are not logical and they're kind of like crazy solutions. All the puzzles in Yugo's House of Horror kind of make sense. But yeah, after that, it's pretty much a short game. In the end, you save your girlfriend and happy ending. So it's an okay. I mean, it's a fun playthrough. You got to take it for what it is. I kind of dig the haunted house scene, and it's kind of a fun little quick point and click adventure game if you're into that kind of thing. The second game in the series is generally known as Yugo's Mystery Adventure, or Yugo's Whodunit, and Yugo 2 Whodunit, something along those lines. The first game was released in 1990. This is a 1991 game, so it's right after. It's pretty much the same affair, sound and graphics wise. The graphics are pretty much the same, although there are a couple scenes that look strange. I believe they're like digitized images, and then they were converted to the crude color palette used. I think it's just VGA, but it's kind of a limited color palette. I think it's like 256 color VGA, but don't quote me on that. But yeah, I mean, there's a couple odd things like that where it's these weird digitized images of like the house and stuff. But this game has more to do. It's a little bit more conventional in a weird way. Apparently the plot is you and your fiancée Penelope go to visit your uncle in England, and Yugo disappears, and Penelope witnesses Uncle Hugo's, or whatever his name is, his murder. So it's basically like a murder mystery. I guess what like the Laura Balboa games. Sorry, I can't think it in my head, but yeah, they're kind of like that, I guess. But you're just kind of wandering around the mansion and the outsides of the mansion. You're just kind of trying to figure out clues, who done it. I didn't really enjoy this game as much as the first one. It seems to be a little bit longer. The puzzles are a little bit harder, although there's nothing ridiculous about it. But I just didn't enjoy the setting as much. There are a couple of nuances where, I mean, you could tell, I believe the designer of the game, he's British, because there's a lot of little Britishy things in it that, okay, I'll give you, for instance, one of the puzzles involves, like, Doctor Who. which is really big in England or Britain. And I mean, it's kind of big here though, but I mean, I'm kind of nerdy, but I never got into Doctor Who. So there was a couple little Doctor Who things, like you get the sonic screwdriver at one point as an item. Well, I had no clue what this thing does. Of course, I can't go on the internet and look up what the sonic screwdriver does. Thankfully, I had a friend that's into Doctor Who, and I had to ask him, like, well, what the hell does the sonic screwdriver do? And he had to explain it, and then I kind of had to figure it out from there. So there are a couple little things like that. Although it's not bad, I didn't like there were some pathfinding issues. I don't know if that's exactly what you call it with this game, where there were just sections that really tripped me up because it just... There's two sections. There's one part where there's a field with Venus flytraps, and there's an essential item, and you have to navigate through these Venus flytraps, but you have to be almost pixel perfect to navigate through them. And for a good while, I was thinking that I needed an item to get through, like something to kill the plants or put them to sleep or something, because I couldn't navigate through it. It tripped me up for the longest time until, I had no other choice, so I just kept trying and trying, and I made it through without touching the plants, and I got the item, and I was like, oh, but, I mean, if you could spend a lot of time there thinking that you need an item to get through, just because to navigate through these plants, you have to be so precisely pixel perfect. There's a couple places, like there's another part in the game where there's an item, and it's on the other side of a chasm, and you have to get to the other side, and, you'll fall, but... it's really hard. The path is down low. It's obscured by rocks, in the foreground, but it's not really immediately obvious. So it's another section of the game where you're thinking, oh, I need an item to get past here, but you don't. You just have to go down and over. And the thing is, even blindly clicking, it's like sometimes, the first couple times I did it, she just went straight forward and fell in the chasm. Or, hit the chasm and wouldn't go through. But later on, you can do it, and she'll just, go down and take the path. It's it seems really weird and random. But that part tripped me up for a while. But overall, I mean, it's pretty much par for the course. I didn't enjoy it as much as the first game. But I think that had a lot to do with, the scenery. I enjoyed the whole haunted house vibe of the first game a lot more. Actually, I enjoyed the first game more than the third one as well. So the third game in the trilogy is Yugo's Amazon adventure. And immediately I was thrown off because there's an elephant in the title screen, and there aren't any elephants in the Amazon. Interesting enough, though, this is addressed later in the game when you come across the elephant, which I thought was kind of funny. That was kind of smart. But yeah, basically the plot of the third game is you and Penelope, I don't know why you're flying over the Amazon, I don't remember, but your plane crashes, and you have to find Penelope. She disappeared, your plane crashed, so it's basically like a jungle adventure-ish sort of point-and-click game. I found this game a little bit easier than the second game, a little bit shorter. It was about the same as the first game as far as length. Again, the logic puzzles, the puzzles really weren't hard to figure out. There's one that gave me trouble, and it had to do with when you're captured by the witch doctor and how to escape him. I don't want to give it away, but that one took a little bit of kind of figuring out and playing around with items. I almost did it by accident, just on a whim. I decided to, type in to do something, and it worked. I was like, huh. But, yeah, I mean, it's pretty much par for the course as the other games go. It's a little... I like the scenery. It was more interesting. The jungle was more interesting, I think, than the second game, the murder mystery, but it still wasn't as fun, I guess, as the atmosphere of the first game. But yeah, I mean, overall, the series is okay. I mean, they pretty much are consistent with visual values and length of these games throughout the series of the three games. I would say they're worth picking up. I think you can I got all three of them on GOG for probably I think it's $5.99 or something like that, $4.99. So I mean, if you like point and click adventure games and you just kind of want a quick one, just kind of like to scratch an itch for point and click, I think they make good choices just because they're so quick, and they're easy, but they're not super easy. So if you just want to spend an hour or two doing a point and click adventure game, it works, especially if you're on the go. Maybe you have an old laptop and you're going somewhere, and they'll certainly run on it, and they're not going to tax that machine too much. But yeah, those were the Yugo series. It's probably worth checking out. So So thanks for listening to this game review. I guess it would be multiple games. I'll try to get more hardware content out there, but like I said, sometimes I'm probably gonna have to start doing videos maybe like once every 2 weeks or even 3 weeks, because I've just kind of run out of hardware at the moment, or I kind of want to pace myself because, you know, writing an article sometimes, I don't put a lot of production values in my videos, so the writing part sometimes is a little bit more intensive or lengthy than the actual video editing part. So, you know, I don't really have the stamina with things going on in life to do an article and a video every week. So it's probably going to be like bi-weekly or twice a month from this point on. But I'll probably throw out more of these sort of fast and loose, quick and easy sort of game reviews. I'll try to hit more obscure DOS game stuff. So hopefully at the very least, maybe I'll bring up a game or two that you've never heard of and you might want to check out, or maybe it'll lead you to a better, well done review. So again, thank you for listening. Again, check out the Yugo Trilogy. It's worth a look at. Thank you again.